This is the story of Sleeping Beauty. Once upon a time, there was a queen who had a beautiful baby daughter. She asked all the fairies in the kingdom to the christening, but unfortunately forgot to invite one of them, who was a bit of a witch, as it were. She came anyway. As she passed the baby's cradle, she says, "When you are 16, you will injure yourself with a spindle and die." Ha 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 ha. "Oh no!" screamed the queen in horror. A good fairy quickly chanted a magic spell to change the curse. When she hurt herself, the girl will fall into a very deep sleep instead of dying. Years went by. The little princess grew and became the most beautiful girl in the world. Her mother was very careful to keep her away from spindles, but the princess, on her 16th birthday, as she wandered through the castle, came into a spare room where an old servant was spinning. "What are you doing?" she asked the servant. "I'm spinning." "Haven't you seen a spindle before?" "No, let me see." The servant handed the girl the spindle, and she pricked herself with it, and with a sigh, dropped to the floor. The terrified old woman hurried to tell the queen, beside herself with anguish. The queen did her best to awaken her daughter, but in vain. The court doctors and wizards were called, but there was nothing they could do. The girl could not be awakened from her deep sleep. The good fairy, who managed to avoid the curse at the time, came too, and the queen said to her, "When will my daughter awaken?" "I don't know," the fairy admitted sadly. "In a year's time? 10 years? Or 20? The queen went on. "Maybe in 100 years' time, who knows?" said the fairy. "Oh, what would make her waken?" asked the queen weakly. "Love," replied the fairy. "If a man of pure heart were to fall in love with her, that would bring her back to life." "How can a man fall in love with a sleeping girl?" sobbed the queen. And so heartbroken was she that a few days later she died. The sleeping princess was taken to her room and laid on the bed, surrounded by garlands of flowers. She was so beautiful, with a sweet face, not like those of dead, but pink like those who are sleeping peacefully. The good fairy said to herself, when she awakens, who is she going to see around her? Strange faces and people she doesn't know. I can never let that happen. It would be too painful for this unfortunate girl. So the fairy cast a spell, and everyone who lived in the castle, soldiers, ministers, guards, servants, ladies, pages, cooks, maids, knights, all fell into a deep sleep, wherever they were at that very moment. "Now," thought the fairy, "when the princess awakes, they too will awaken, and the life will go on from there." She left the castle, now wrapped in silence. Not a sound to be heard, nothing moved except the clocks. But when they ran down, they stopped, and time stopped, and then not even the faintest rustle was to be heard, only the wind whistling round the turrets. Not a single voice, only the cry of birds. The years sped past in the castle grounds. The trees grew tall, the bushes became thick and straggling, the grass invaded the courtyards, and the creepers spread all over the walls. In 100 years, a dense forest grew up. Now it just so happened that a prince arrived in these parts. He was the son of a king in the country close by. Young, handsome, and melancholy, he sought in solitude everything he could find in the company of other men: serenity, sincerity, and purity. Wandering on his trusty steed, he arrived one day at the dark forest. Being adventurous, he decided to explore it. He made his way through slowly and with a struggle, for the trees and the bushes grew in a thick tangle. A few hours later, now losing heart, He was about to turn his horse back and go back the way he came through the trees, but instead he pushed back the branches. Wonders of wonders! There in front of him stood a castle with high towers. The young man stood stock still in amazement. I wonder who this castle belongs to, he thought. The young prince rode on towards the castle. The drawbridge was down, and holding his horse by the reins, he crossed over to it. Immediately he saw the inhabitants draped all over the steps, the halls, courtyard, and said to himself, "Good heavens, they're dead!" But in a moment he realised they were sound asleep. Wake up, he shouted, but nobody moved. Still thoroughly astounded, he went into the castle and again discovered more people lying fast asleep on the floor. As though led by a hand in the complete silence, the prince finally reached the room where the beautiful princess lay fast asleep. For a long time he stood gazing at her, so full of serenity, so peaceful, lovely and pure. And he felt spring to his heart, that love he had always been searching for and never found. Overcome by emotion, he went close, lifted the girl's little white hand and gently kissed it. At that kiss the princess quickly opened her eyes, and wakening from her long sleep, seeing the princess beside her, murmured, "Oh, you have come at last, and I was waiting for you in my dreams. I've waited so long." Just then the spell was broken, and the prince rose to her feet, holding out her hand to the prince, and the whole castle woke up too. Everybody rose to their feet, and they all started round in amazement, wondering what had happened. When they finally realised, they rushed to the princess, who beautifully and happy ever after. Sorry, I said that wrong. It should have said was more beautiful and happier than ever. A few days later, the castle that only a short time before had lain in silence now rang with the sound of singing, music and happy laughter. At the great party given in honour of the prince and princess who were getting married, they lived happily ever after, as they always do in fairy tales. Not quite so often, however, in real life. Oh, the end.